Ji-won sat in her usual spot at the back corner of the Grand Assembly Hall. Her fingers moved quickly across her data pad, recording every word spoken during the diplomatic meeting. Around her, dozens of alien species filled the massive room with their strange voices and even stranger appearances. The assembly hall was part of the Celestial Harmony, a huge space station that floated above a planet called Viridian Prime. This station was neutral ground where different alien races came to talk, trade, and solve their problems. Humans had only been part of this galactic community for 15 years. They were still the new ones, still trying to prove they belonged. Ji-won was 24 years old and worked as a linguist for the Korean delegation. She was short, barely reaching 5 feet tall, with long black hair that she always tied back neatly. She wore simple clothes and spoke only when necessary. Most aliens never noticed her at all. She was just another human in the corner, quiet and forgettable. The meeting today was about trade routes. Ambassador Tai Yang, the leader of the Korean delegation, sat at the main table. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. He spoke calmly and carefully, trying to negotiate fair terms for humanity. Next to him sat Captain Hyun-woo, a military advisor with a stern face and straight posture. Dr. So-jin, a scientist who studied alien biology, sat reviewing data on her tablet. Envoy Mina handled trade discussions and smiled often, even when negotiations got difficult. But the loudest voice in the room did not belong to any human. Thrax the Unbroken stood at the center of the hall. He was a Vrakon, a member of a reptilian warrior race that dominated much of the galaxy. Thrax was over 8 feet tall with thick armored scales covering his body. His muscles bulged under his ceremonial armor. His yellow eyes glowed with confidence and barely hidden contempt. "These humans waste our time with their endless talking," Thrax said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "They speak of peace and cooperation, but what have they proven? Nothing. They are weak, soft. They have no warriors, no strength, no honor." Several other alien species murmured in agreement. In this galaxy, strength mattered more than words. The races that controlled the most territory, the most resources, and the most respect were all warrior cultures. They respected physical power and combat ability. Diplomacy was seen as something weak species used when they could not fight. Ambassador Tai Yang remained calm. "We believe that strength comes in many forms. Humanity may be new to this community, but we have much to offer through knowledge, innovation, and peaceful cooperation." Thrax laughed. It was a harsh, mocking sound. Knowledge? Innovation? These mean nothing without the power to defend them. In this galaxy, only the strong survive. The weak are forgotten. Ji-won continued taking notes. She had heard speeches like this many times before. The Vrakon Empire controlled dozens of star systems and maintained their power through ritual combat. Their warriors were legendary. Thrax himself had never lost a fight in 20 years. He was their champion, their pride, their symbol of superiority. What none of them knew was that Ji-won had been studying them all. Every gesture, every word, every movement. She learned their languages, their customs, their biology. She memorized the way Vrakon warriors moved, where their scales were thickest, where the gaps appeared between the armored plates. She did this not because anyone asked her to, but because observation was her nature. Ji-won had grown up in a small mountain village in Korea. Her grandmother had raised her after her parents died in an accident. Every morning before dawn, her grandmother would wake her for training. They would practice martial arts in the misty courtyard behind their house. Her grandmother taught her forms that had been passed down for generations. "True strength is silent," her grandmother would say. "The loudest warrior is often the weakest. Watch, learn, wait. When you move, move with purpose." Ji-won trained every day for 18 years. She learned to read her opponent's intentions before they moved. She learned that size and strength mattered less than timing and precision. She learned that a small person could defeat a large one if they understood leverage and anatomy, but she never talked about her training with anyone. When she joined the diplomatic corps, she left her past in the mountains. She became a linguist, a note-taker, a quiet presence in the corner. The meeting continued for another hour. Ambassador Tai Yang brought up the topic of mining rights. There was a moon orbiting a nearby planet that contained rare minerals. These minerals were valuable for making advanced technology. Korea wanted to establish a small mining operation there. "We have the technology and expertise to extract these resources efficiently," Tai Yang explained. We propose a partnership with interested parties to share the benefits. Thrax slammed his massive fist on the table. The sound was like thunder. Several smaller aliens jumped in surprise. Weaklings have no right to claim valuable resources, Thrax growled. That moon should belong to those strong enough to take it and hold it, not to soft-skinned humans who hide behind words. The room fell silent.
Even the other alien delegations seemed uncomfortable with Thrax's aggression, but none of them spoke against him.
The Vrakon Empire was too powerful to challenge directly. Ambassador Tae Yang took a deep breath. We are not trying to take anything. We are proposing cooperation. Surely there is room for— Enough, Thrax interrupted. He stood to his full height, towering over everyone in the room. I challenge you to ritual combat. If you have the strength to claim these resources, prove it. Face me in the arena. If you win, take your mining rights. If you lose, humanity withdraws its claim and admits its weakness before the entire galaxy. The silence grew heavier. Everyone knew what this meant. Vrakon ritual combat was brutal. Two fighters entered an arena with no weapons and fought until one of them could not continue. Thrax had fought 17 times in such matches and won them all. Most of his opponents had been severely injured. 2 had died. Ambassador Tae Yang was a diplomat, not a fighter. He was 63 years old. The other humans at the table were equally unprepared for physical combat against a Vrakon warrior. Captain Hyun-woo leaned close to whisper to the ambassador, but Thrax noticed. Discussing how to run away? Thrax laughed. Typical humans. You have 24 hours to accept the challenge. If you refuse, you will be marked as cowards. Every species in this galaxy will know that humanity cannot defend its own interests. You will be expelled from these negotiations and no one will take you seriously again. Thrax turned and walked out of the hall. His heavy footsteps echoed long after he disappeared through the doorway. The other alien delegations began whispering among themselves. Some looked at the humans with pity. Others looked disappointed, as if they had hoped humanity would be more than it appeared. Ambassador Tae Yang stood slowly. We will adjourn this meeting. The Korean delegation needs to discuss this matter privately. The humans gathered their things and left the hall together. As they walked through the corridors of the space station, none of them spoke. The weight of the impossible choice pressed down on all of them. Ji-won walked behind them, still carrying her datapad. She looked calm, almost peaceful, but inside her mind she was already calculating. She had watched Thrax move. She had studied Vrakon biology for months. She knew their weak points, their patterns, their overconfidence. She knew exactly how to defeat him. But first, she had to convince her team to let her try. The Korean delegation gathered in their private conference room. The room was small compared to the Grand Assembly Hall, with a simple table and chairs. A large window showed the stars outside, distant and cold. Ambassador Tae Yang sat at the head of the table. His face looked tired. Captain Hyun-woo stood near the window, his arms crossed. Dr. Sojin was already pulling up data on her tablet. Envoy Minna looked worried, biting her lower lip. Ji-won sat in her usual corner spot, quiet and still. Options, Tae Yang said simply. We need options. Captain Hyun-woo spoke first. We could refuse the challenge. Yes, we would be seen as cowards, but at least no one gets hurt. We could rebuild our reputation over time through other means. That could take decades, Minna said. And there is no guarantee other species would give us another chance. First impressions matter in diplomacy. If we run now, they will never respect us. Dr. Sojin looked up from her tablet. I have been analyzing Vrakon physiology. Their bone density is 3 times higher than human bones. Their muscle fibers are significantly stronger. Their scales can deflect most blunt force impacts. Even our strongest military personnel would be at a severe disadvantage. What about weapons? Hyun-woo asked. Ritual combat forbids weapons, Tae Yang reminded him. Both fighters enter the arena with nothing. It is meant to be a pure test of physical ability. Then we are at an impossible disadvantage, Sojin said quietly. Thrax weighs approximately 800 pounds and stands over 8 feet tall. His reach is nearly twice that of an average human. The physics alone make victory almost impossible. The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. This was not a fair fight. It was designed to humiliate them. We could file a formal protest, Minna suggested, argued that the challenge is inappropriate for a diplomatic setting. Tae Yang shook his head. The Vrakon operate within the established protocols. Ritual combat is recognized by the Galactic Council as a legitimate method of settling disputes. Other species would see our protest as more evidence of weakness. So we are trapped, Hyunwoo said, anger creeping into his voice. Accept and get hurt or refuse and get humiliated. Either way, we lose. Jiwon had been listening quietly. Now she spoke, her voice soft but clear. I will fight him. Everyone turned to look at her. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Taeyang leaned forward. Jiwon, I appreciate your courage, but I can win, she said simply. Captain Hyunwoo walked over to her. You are a linguist. Thrax is a trained warrior who has fought for 20 years. He outweighs you by 700 pounds. This is not about courage. This is about reality. I have trained in martial arts since I was 6 years old, Jiwon said. My grandmother taught me. Every morning for 18 years we practiced together. I know how to fight. Dr. Sojin looked sympathetic but doubtful. Martial arts training is admirable, but even a master would struggle against a Vrakan. The physical differences are too extreme. It would be like asking a child to fight an adult. Size is not everything, Jiwon said. She stood up and walked to the center of the room. Strength can be used against itself. A larger opponent moves differently. They rely on power because power has always worked for them. They become predictable. She moved as she spoke, demonstrating a flowing movement that looked almost like a dance. Her feet barely made a sound. Thrax is confident because he has never lost. Confidence creates patterns. Patterns create weaknesses. Ambassador Taeyang watched her carefully. Something in her movements was different from anything he had seen before. She moved with absolute precision, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Have you ever fought anyone before? He asked. In actual combat, not just practice? Jiwon paused. No. My grandmother always said that a true warrior avoids fighting whenever possible. But she also said that when you must fight, you fight to win quickly and decisively. This is insane, Hyunwoo said. We cannot send her into that arena. If something goes wrong, if she gets seriously injured or worse, it will be our responsibility. And if we refuse the challenge, humanity's standing in the galactic community suffers. Minna pointed out. We might lose more than just this negotiation. Other species might close their doors to us. Taeyang rubbed his temples. He had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. He had negotiated with warlords and peacekeepers, with merchants and scientists. But he had never faced a decision quite like this. Jiwon, he said carefully, I need you to understand what you are offering. Thrax will not hold back. He wants to make an example of us. He will hurt you if he can. I understand, Jiwon said. You could die. I understand. Then help me understand why you are so confident. What do you know that we do not? Jiwon returned to her seat. She pulled up files on her datapad and projected them onto the wall. Images of Vrykon anatomy appeared, detailed diagrams showing bone structure, muscle groups, and scale patterns. I have been studying them for 6 months, she said. Every Vrykon warrior who has fought in ritual combat. I have watched hundreds of hours of recordings. They all move in similar ways. They rely on their strength and their armor, but armor must have gaps to allow movement. She pointed to a spot where the neck met the shoulder, here between the scales. There is a nerve cluster that controls their entire upper body. It is protected most of the time. But when they attack, when they put their full power into a strike, the scales separate slightly. Dr. Sojin leaned closer to the image. You are right, I see it. But hitting such a small target during combat would require perfect timing. Timing is what I have trained for, Jiwon said. My grandmother taught me that power without precision is wasted energy. She taught me to wait, to watch, to move only when the moment is right. Captain Hyunwoo still looked skeptical. Even if you could hit that spot, would it be enough to stop him? A precise strike to that nerve cluster would temporarily paralyze his dominant arm, Jiwon explained. He would lose balance. I would have a few seconds to finish the technique. Taeyang studied the diagrams, then looked at Jiwon. You have thought about this a great deal. I think about many things, Jiwon said quietly. People assume I am just taking notes in the corner. But I am always watching, always learning. The room fell silent again. Ambassador Taeyang stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, uncaring about the small dramas of mortal beings. I need to see you fight, he said finally. Not diagrams. Not theory. I need to see what you can actually do. There is a cargo bay on level 7 that is currently empty, Jiwon said. We could go there now. They made their way through the station's corridors. Other aliens passed them, some curious, some dismissive. News of the challenge was already spreading. By morning, the entire station would know about it. The cargo bay was large and empty, perfect for a demonstration. Ji-won walked to the center while the others stood near the wall. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed. The quiet linguist was gone. In her place stood someone focused and dangerous. She moved through a series of techniques, each one flowing into the next. Her movements were impossibly fast but perfectly controlled. She demonstrated strikes, sweeps, throws, and locks. She showed them how to redirect force, how to use momentum, how to turn an opponent's strength into their weakness. Captain Hyunwoo watched with growing surprise. He had military training, but he had never seen anything quite like this. Dr. So-jin recorded everything on her tablet, analyzing the biomechanics. Minna simply stared, amazed. When Ji-won finished, she was barely breathing hard. She bowed slightly and returned to her normal posture. Ambassador Tae-yang approached her. "Where did your grandmother learn to fight like this?" "From her grandmother," Ji-won said. "And she from hers." "The knowledge has been passed down for many generations. My family protected our village for hundreds of years. Why did you never mention this before?" "You never asked. And it did not seem relevant to my work as a linguist." Tae-yang smiled slightly. "You are full of surprises, Ji-won." He turned to address the whole team. "This is still her decision to make. I will not order anyone to fight. But if she volunteers and if she understands the risks, I will support her choice." Captain Hyunwoo stepped forward. "If we do this, I want to review the combat rules in detail. Maybe there is something we can use to our advantage. I will prepare a full medical analysis of Vrakon physiology," Dr. So-jin added. "Any information that might help," Minna nodded. "I will handle the formal response to the challenge. We need to make this official." They all looked at Ji-won. She stood quietly, her face calm and certain. "Tomorrow morning we will send our response to Thrax," Ambassador Tae-yang said. "Ji-won will accept his challenge. May whatever gods watch over us grant her victory." As they left the cargo bay, Ji-won remained behind for a moment. She closed her eyes and thought of her grandmother, of those cold mountain mornings, of lessons learned in silence and discipline. "True strength is silent," she whispered to herself. "Watch, learn, wait. When you move, move with purpose." Tomorrow, the entire galaxy would be watching, and she would show them what humanity could do. Time seemed to slow down. Thrax's massive fist moved through the air like a hammer falling. 800 pounds of muscle and bone behind it. Enough force to shatter concrete. Enough power to end the fight in one terrible moment. The crowd watched, some with excitement, some with horror. In the human section, Captain Hyunwoo half rose from his seat, his hands gripping the railing. Dr. So-jin could not look away even though part of her wanted to. Ambassador Tae-yang sat perfectly still, his faith in Ji-won fighting against his fear for her safety. Ji-won did not move. Not yet. She watched Thrax's fist coming closer, watched his body commit to the strike, watched him put everything into this one overwhelming attack. He was so confident, so sure of his victory. That confidence was his weakness. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her mind. "Timing is everything. Too early and you telegraph your intention. Too late and you miss your opportunity. Wait for the perfect moment. Wait now." Ji-won moved. It was not a retreat. She did not jump backward or try to block. Instead, she stepped forward and to the side in one smooth motion. It looked almost lazy, like she was simply taking a stroll, but the movement was calculated down to the millimeter. Thrax's fist passed through empty air where Ji-won had been a fraction of a second before. The momentum of his massive punch carried him forward. His weight shifted. His balance, perfect a moment ago, was now compromised. And that was when Ji-won struck. She moved inside his guard, her body flowing like water around a rock. Her target was exactly where she had told her team it would be, the small gap between the armored scales at the junction of Thrax's neck and shoulder, the place where nerves clustered close to the surface, controlling his entire right side. Her strike was not a wild punch. It was precise, controlled, delivered with perfect technique. Her fingers were extended into a rigid point. She hit the exact spot she had visualized 1,000 times in her training. The effect was immediate. Thrax felt something like lightning shoot through his right side. His arm went numb instantly. Not weak, not tired. Completely numb, as if it had simply stopped existing. The signals from his brain could not reach the muscles anymore. His eyes went wide with shock. In 20 years of fighting, nothing like this had ever happened to him. His right arm hung uselessly at his side. Worse, the sudden loss of sensation threw off his balance. His forward momentum, which should have carried him through the punch and allowed him to recover, instead sent him stumbling. But Ji-won was not finished. The moment her strike landed, she was already moving into the next part of the technique. While Thrax struggled to understand what had happened, Ji-won dropped low and swept her leg in a wide arc. It was a classic technique, but executed with perfect timing. Her leg connected with Thrax's ankle just as his weight was shifting. In any other circumstance, sweeping a Vrakon warrior would be impossible. They were too heavy, too stable. But right now, at this exact moment, Thrax was off balance with his center of gravity too far forward, and his right arm unable to help him compensate. Physics took over. 800 pounds of Vrakon warrior went down. Thrax hit the arena floor with a crash that echoed through the entire space. The impact was so heavy that it created a visible dent in the reinforced metal plating. The crowd gasped. Many aliens stood up from their seats in shock. The Vrakon section went completely silent. Thrax tried to rise immediately. His warrior instincts told him to get up, to continue fighting. But Ji-won had positioned herself perfectly. As he began to push himself up with his left arm, she was already there. Her knee pressed down on the same nerve cluster she had struck a moment before. The pressure sent another wave of paralysis through Thrax's upper body. He could not move his right arm, could barely feel his right shoulder. His left arm was strong, but without the balance and support of his right side, he could not generate the leverage to stand. Ji-won's hand hovered near Thrax's temple, not touching it, but close enough that the threat was clear. One precise strike to that spot and the fight would truly be over. Thrax knew it. Everyone watching knew it. Yield, Ji-won said quietly. Her voice was calm, not triumphant or angry. Just stating a fact. Thrax's mind raced. This could not be happening. He was the champion. He had never lost. This tiny human should not have been able to touch him, let alone put him on the ground. Yet here he was, unable to rise, facing the very real possibility of losing consciousness if she struck again. Pride warred with pragmatism. Every instinct told him to fight on, to find some way to turn this around. But his warrior training also taught him to recognize when a battle was truly lost. He was defenseless. She had won. Yield, Ji-won repeated, still in that same calm voice. The word felt like poison in Thrax's mouth. 20 years of victories, 20 years of being called the Unbroken, all of it crumbling in 3 seconds of combat. But he was still a warrior. A warrior knew when to acknowledge defeat. I yield, Thrax said. The words came out like gravel, rough and painful, but they were clear enough for everyone to hear. For a moment, the entire arena was completely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the silence broke. The referee rushed forward. Victory to Ji-won of the Korean delegation. The match is concluded. The human section erupted in cheers. Ambassador Tae-yang was on his feet, tears in his eyes. Captain Hyunwoo was shouting in joy. Dr. Sojin was hugging Minna, both of them laughing with relief and amazement. Other sections of the crowd reacted differently. Some aliens cheered, impressed by the upset. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The Vrakon section was completely quiet, every warrior staring at the arena in disbelief. Ji-won stood and stepped back, giving Thrax space. The paralysis was already fading. Feeling was returning to his right arm, though it would be weak for several minutes. Thrax slowly pushed himself to his knees, then to his feet. He looked down at Ji-won. She was barely half his height, yet she had defeated him. Completely. Decisively. In 3 seconds. How? He asked simply. I watched you fight, Ji-won said. All of your matches. You always lead with power. Always commit fully to your first strike. It works against opponents who fear you. But fear makes them move too early or too late. I did not fear you. I waited for the right moment. Thrax rubbed his numb shoulder. The nerve strike. I have never experienced anything like it. It is a technique my grandmother taught me. Precision over power. Your scales protect you from most attacks, but armor must have gaps to allow movement. I studied Vrakon anatomy until I found the vulnerability. You studied us? For how long? 6 months. Thrax was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. While he had been celebrating his victories and mocking humans as weak, This small female had been watching him, learning his patterns, finding his weaknesses. She had defeated him before the fight even began. Around them, the holographic cameras continued recording. The footage would be played billions of times across the galaxy. The moment when the undefeated Vrakon champion fell to a human who most aliens had never noticed before. Jiwan bowed to Thrax. It was a gesture of respect, not mockery. Thrax hesitated, then bowed back. It was awkward. Vrakon warriors did not usually bow to anyone, but something about this moment felt important. Sacred, even. "You are a true warrior," Thrax said. "I was wrong to mock your people. I was wrong to assume strength only comes in one form." "Thank you," Jiwan said simply. The referee approached them. "Are both combatants uninjured?" "I am fine," Jiwan said. Thrax flexed his right arm. Feeling was mostly restored. "I will recover. No permanent damage. Then this matter is concluded. The Korean delegation's claim to the mining rights is affirmed. Let all species bear witness." Security personnel gestured for both fighters to exit the arena. Jiwan walked toward the door she had entered through. The crowd's noise washed over her like a wave. Cheering, shouting, dozens of languages all expressing shock and amazement. But Jiwan barely heard it. She was already thinking about what came next. The fight was over, but in many ways the real challenge was just beginning. Everything had changed in those 3 seconds. Humanity's place in the galaxy, the other species' perception of what humans could do, and somewhere in her heart she heard her grandmother's voice one last time. "You did well, little one. You made me proud." Jiwan allowed herself a small smile. She had done what she needed to do. Nothing more, nothing less. And tomorrow she would return to her corner seat, her data pad and her quiet observations. But the galaxy would never see her the same way again. The hours after the fight passed in a blur of chaos and celebration. The Korean delegation returned to their conference room, where they could finally speak freely without alien observers. Ambassador Tai Yang embraced Jiwan the moment the door closed behind them. "You were magnificent," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I believed in you, but watching it happen was something else entirely." Captain Hyunwoo shook his head in amazement. 3 seconds. I timed it. From the moment the match began until Thrax yielded, only 3 seconds passed. I have never seen anything like it. Dr. So-Jin was already analyzing the footage on her tablet. The precision of that nerve strike was incredible. You hit a target less than 2 centimeters wide while moving at high speed. The margin for error was essentially 0. My grandmother used to make me practice striking individual raindrops, Jiwan said quietly. She said if you could hit something that small and moving, you could hit anything. Mina laughed. The betting pools are in chaos. Most of them refused to pay out at first. They thought there was some kind of mistake. When they finally accepted the results, several bookmakers went bankrupt. That is not our concern, Taeyang said, though he smiled. What matters is that we secured our mining rights and demonstrated that humanity deserves respect in this community. But Jiwon knew it was more complicated than that. Victory in the arena had solved one problem but created others. She excused herself and returned to her quarters, needing time alone to think. The messages started arriving within minutes. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Interview requests from galactic news networks. Congratulations from human delegations across the galaxy. Even messages from military recruiters wanting to know if she would consider training their forces. Jiwon ignored them all. She sat on her small bed and closed her eyes, trying to center herself. The fight had been easy compared to what came next. Now everyone would be watching her, expecting things from her. She had wanted to remain unnoticed, but that was impossible now. A knock came at her door. She opened it to find Thrax standing in the corridor. The Vrakon warrior had to duck his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. His presence filled the small space. "May I enter?" he asked. Jiwon stepped aside. Thrax came in, moving carefully in the confined area designed for human-sized beings. He looked uncomfortable, not from physical pain but from something deeper. "I have been thinking about our fight," Thrax said, "about everything it revealed. I came to ask you something." "What is it?" "Would you teach me?" The words came out rushed, as if he had to force them out before his pride stopped him. "I have trained as a warrior my entire life. 50 years of combat. I thought I knew everything about fighting. But you showed me how wrong I was. You defeated me with knowledge I never considered. I want to learn. Ji-won studied him carefully. Why? Because I am tired of being ignorant, Thrax said simply. I mocked humans as weak. I laughed at your diplomacy and your preference for peace. But you were not weak. You were watching, learning, preparing. While I celebrated my victories, you were becoming stronger than me in ways I did not understand. That kind of dedication deserves respect. That kind of skill deserves to be learned. Learning what I know requires patience, Ji-won said. It requires accepting that you will fail many times before you succeed. It requires humility. Then I will learn humility, Thrax said. I have already learned it once today. Ji-won considered his request. Teaching a Vrakon warrior could help bridge the gap between their species. It could show other aliens that humans had something valuable to offer beyond just technology or diplomacy. I will teach you, she said finally, but you must understand that this is not just about fighting techniques. My grandmother taught me that martial arts is a way of living, not just a skill for combat. If you only want to learn how to win fights, find another teacher. I understand, Thrax said. He bowed that same awkward bow from the arena. When do we begin? Tomorrow morning early before the station wakes up. Thrax nodded and left. Ji-won sat back down on her bed, wondering what her grandmother would think about her teaching of Vrakon warrior. She decided her grandmother would approve. Knowledge was meant to be shared after all. The next morning, Ji-won met Thrax in the same cargo bay where she had demonstrated her skills to her team. He arrived exactly on time, wearing simple training clothes instead of his usual armor and ceremonial garments. They trained for 2 hours. Ji-won showed him basic stances, breathing techniques, and the philosophy behind each movement. Thrax struggled at first. His body was built for power, not the fluid movements she was teaching. But he persisted, working through the difficulty with determination. Other Vrakon warriors began arriving to watch. By the end of the week, 5 of them were training with Ji-won. Word spread further. Warriors from other species came to observe, then asked to join. Within a month, Ji-won was teaching regular classes to aliens from a dozen different races. The trade negotiations resumed with a dramatically different atmosphere. The alien delegations that had dismissed humanity now paid careful attention to everything the Korean team said. Ambassador Tae-yang negotiated favorable terms not just for the mining rights but for several other agreements as well. More importantly, other human delegations found doors opening that had been closed before. Species that had refused to meet with humans now sent ambassadors. Trade agreements were signed. Cultural exchanges were arranged. The defeat of Thrax had changed humanity's entire position in the galactic community. 3 months after the fight, a new species arrived at the Celestial Harmony Station. The Krell were a warrior race even more aggressive than the Vrakon. They had recently joined the galactic community and immediately began making demands and challenging other species to prove their dominance. Their champion, a massive creature covered in spikes and claws, challenged the station's strongest fighter to ritual combat. The challenge was issued in the Grand Assembly Hall during a diplomatic session. Every alien delegate turned to look at one corner of the room. Ji-won sat there as always, quietly taking notes on her data pad. She looked up, feeling all the eyes on her. The Krell champion followed their gazes and saw her for the first time. That small thing? The Krell warrior said, confusion in his voice. What is everyone looking at? Ambassador Tae-yang smiled slightly. Perhaps you should ask around about our colleague Ji-won before you decide who to challenge. The Krell delegation did ask around. Within an hour, they had watched the footage of Ji-won's fight with Thrax. They saw the 3-second defeat of a warrior who had been undefeated for 20 years. They saw the precision, the timing, the absolute mastery. The next day, the Krell delegation formally requested a diplomatic meeting instead of combat. They wanted to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchange. Their champion asked if he could possibly join Ji-won's training sessions. The pattern repeated itself over the following months. Aggressive species arrived expecting to dominate through strength. They saw the quiet human woman sitting in the corner. They learned her story. They reconsidered their approach. Ji-won's training classes grew larger. She taught warriors from 30 different species. They learned not just fighting techniques but philosophy, the importance of observation, the value of patience, the strength that comes from understanding rather than domination. Thrax became her assistant instructor. The once proud champion who had mocked humanity now helped teach human martial arts to aliens across the galaxy. He told everyone who would listen about his mistake, about his ignorance, about the lesson he had learned. One day, nearly a year after the fight, Ambassador Tae-yang asked Ji-won to join him for tea in his private quarters. They sat by the window looking out at the stars. "I have been thinking about your grandmother," Tae-yang said. "She must have been an extraordinary woman to teach you so well." "She was," Ji-won said softly. "She used to say that a warrior who seeks glory is weak, but a warrior who seeks understanding is invincible." "She was right," Tae-yang said. "You have done more for humanity's standing in this galaxy than all our diplomats combined. Not through violence, but through demonstrating what humans can achieve through dedication and discipline." "I just did what needed to be done," Ji-won said. "That is what makes you remarkable. You never sought attention or recognition. You were content to sit in the corner and observe. But when the moment came, you were ready." Ji-won looked out at the stars. "My grandmother also taught me that true strength is quiet. The galaxy is loud enough already. Someone needs to remember the value of silence," Tae-yang chuckled. "You can return to your quiet corner anytime you want. Though I suspect people will keep watching you now." "Let them watch," Ji-won said. "I will still be doing the same thing I always do. Learning, observing, growing stronger not for glory, but because it is the right way to live." In the months that followed, humanity's integration into galactic society accelerated. Human businesses established trade routes with alien worlds. Human scientists collaborated with alien researchers. Human artists shared their culture with beings they had only dreamed about years before. And through it all, Ji-won continued her work. She sat in her corner during diplomatic meetings, taking notes on her datapad. She taught her classes. The news spread through the Celestial Harmony Station like wildfire. Within hours, every species knew about the upcoming fight. A human had accepted Thrax's challenge. More specifically, a small human female who most aliens had never even noticed before. The betting pools opened immediately. Odds were set at 500 to 1 against Ji-won. Some bookmakers offered even worse odds. A few refused to take bets at all, saying it would be wrong to profit from what was clearly going to be a quick and brutal defeat. Ji-won spent the night in meditation. She sat cross-legged in her small quarters, breathing slowly and deeply. She visualized the fight over and over in her mind. Every possible movement Thrax might make. Every opening he might create. Every opportunity she would need to recognize in a fraction of a second. She did not sleep. She did not need to. Her grandmother had taught her how to rest her body while keeping her mind sharp. It was an old technique, one that allowed warriors to stay alert before battle. In another part of the station, Thrax celebrated with his fellow Vracon warriors. They drank strong liquor and laughed about the upcoming match. Thrax found the whole situation amusing. A tiny human female thought she could challenge him. It was absurd, insulting even, but it would make for good entertainment. "Try not to break her too badly," one of his companions said. "We do not want the humans to cry about it afterward." "I will be gentle," Thrax promised, grinning. "Perhaps just a few broken bones. Nothing permanent. I am not a monster after all." They all laughed at that. Morning came. The arena was located in the center of the station, a massive circular platform 50 meters across. Energy barriers surrounded it, designed to contain the fighters and protect the spectators. Above and around the arena were observation decks that could hold thousands of beings. Every seat was full. Aliens from dozens of species crowded together, all wanting to witness the spectacle. Some came out of curiosity. Others came hoping to see humanity humbled. A few came because they secretly hoped to see something unexpected, though they would not admit it out loud. Holographic cameras floated around the arena, ready to broadcast the fight across the galaxy. Millions of beings would watch from their home worlds. This was more than just a fight between two individuals. It had become a statement about humanity's place in the galactic community. Ambassador Tae-yang sat in the front row of the human delegation section. Captain Hyunwoo sat beside him, his face tense. Dr. Sojin and Envoy Minna were there too. All of them looked worried. They believed in Ji-won, but belief felt fragile when faced with the reality of what was about to happen. The referee entered the arena first. It was a crystalline being from the Luminar Collective, a species known for their neutrality and fairness. The crystal being's body glowed with soft blue light as it moved to the center of the platform. "Beings of the galactic community," the referee announced, its voice somehow both musical and clear. "We gather today to witness ritual combat between Thrax of the Vrakon Empire and Jiwon of the Korean delegation, representing humanity. The rules are simple and ancient. No weapons, no assistance. The match ends when one fighter yields or loses consciousness. Both combatants have agreed to these terms. Let all who watch bear witness to the outcome." The Vrakon delegation erupted in cheers and war cries. Their section of the observation deck was filled with warriors and supporters, all of them confident in Thrax's victory. The human section was much quieter. A few other human delegations from different nations had come to watch. They sat silently, hoping but not quite believing. "Thrax the Unbroken will now enter the arena," the referee announced. A massive door opened on one side of the platform. Thrax stepped through and the crowd's noise grew louder. He was an impressive sight, over 8 feet of pure warrior. His scales gleamed under the arena lights, dark green with hints of gold. His muscles moved like coiled steel beneath the armor. He wore only simple combat shorts, leaving his arms, legs, and torso exposed to show his physical superiority. Thrax raised his arms and roared. It was a deep, primal sound that made even the energy barriers vibrate. The Vrakon section roared back. Other aliens clapped or made their own species-specific sounds of approval. Thrax moved to his starting position and began his pre-fight ritual. He punched the air, demonstrating his speed and power. He slammed his fist into the arena floor, creating a visible crack in the reinforced metal. The crowd cheered louder. "And now," the referee said, "Jiwon of the Korean delegation will enter the arena." The door on the opposite side opened. Jiwon stepped through into the light. The cheering stopped. Silence fell over the arena like a heavy blanket. She looked impossibly small compared to Thrax. She wore a simple white training uniform, the kind used in traditional martial arts. Her black hair was tied back in a tight bun. Her feet were bare. She carried nothing, wore nothing except the plain white clothes. She walked calmly to her starting position, her steps quiet and measured. If she felt any fear or nervousness, it did not show on her face. She looked focused but peaceful, like someone preparing for meditation rather than combat. The size difference was shocking. Thrax towered over her. If they had stood next to each other, the top of her head would barely reach his chest. He outweighed her by 700 pounds at least. His arms were thicker than her legs. Some aliens in the crowd started laughing. They could not help it. The visual contrast was too extreme. It looked like a joke, like some kind of performance art. Surely this tiny human did not actually intend to fight the Vrakon champion. In the human section, Ambassador Tae Yang closed his eyes briefly. He trusted Jiwon, but seeing her standing there so small and alone made his heart ache with worry. The referee moved between the two fighters. "Combatants, approach." Thrax strode forward confidently. Jiwon walked calmly to meet him at the center of the arena. Standing this close, the difference was even more pronounced. "Do you understand the rules?" the referee asked. Both fighters nodded. "Do you enter this combat willingly and of sound mind?" "Yes," Thrax said, his voice booming. "Yes," Jiwon said quietly. The referee looked at Jiwon. "You may withdraw at any time before the match begins. There is no shame in recognizing a battle you cannot win." "I understand," Jiwon said. "I will not withdraw." The referee paused, perhaps hoping she would reconsider. When she did not, it nodded and stepped back. "Return to your positions." Thrax walked back to his starting point. Before he turned away, he looked down at Jiwon. "I will try to end this quickly, little human. I do not enjoy hurting those weaker than myself. When the pain becomes too much, just say you yield. I will stop immediately." Jiwon looked up at him. Her eyes were calm and clear. "Thank you for your concern. You should know that I will also try to end this quickly." Thrax laughed. He thought she was trying to be brave, to save face before the inevitable defeat. He did not realize she meant exactly what she said. They returned to their starting positions, standing 50 feet apart. The referee raised one crystalline arm. "Fighters, prepare yourselves." Thrax settled into his combat stance. It was a traditional Vrakon warrior position, designed to showcase strength and intimidate opponents. His massive hands flexed. His muscles tensed, his eyes focused on Jiwon with the intensity of a predator. Jiwon lowered herself into her own stance. It was much different from Thrax's. Her feet were positioned for mobility rather than power. Her hands were open and relaxed. Her center of gravity was low. She looked like water ready to flow, while Thrax looked like a mountain ready to crush. She took one slow breath and let it out. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. In the moment before combat, empty your mind of doubt. See only what is. Move only when the moment is right. Trust your training. Trust yourself. G1's eyes fixed on Thrax. She watched the way he distributed his weight. She noted the slight angle of his shoulders. She measured the distance between them and calculated how many steps he would need to close the gap. Everything became clear and simple. The crowd held its breath. Thousands of aliens leaned forward in their seats. Millions more watched on their viewing screens across the galaxy. Everyone waiting for the fight to begin. Everyone except G1. She was not waiting. She was ready. The referee's crystalline arm dropped. Begin. The tone sounded. The match had started. Thrax charged forward with explosive speed. Despite his massive size, he moved like lightning. The floor shook under his feet. He closed the distance in 3 enormous strides, his right fist already drawn back for a devastating punch. The punch was aimed at G1's torso. If it connected, the fight would be over. Broken ribs at minimum, possibly worse. Thrax put his full strength into it, intending to end this match in a single blow. The entire galaxy watched, and G1, the quiet girl who everyone had ignored, began to move.